Heyo YouTube, Flowcat here, and welcome to my video. Today I will be discussing a game that I have a lot of love for, a game that I've put nearly 1,000 hours into and that I've kept an eye on for years and years. This game is Project Zomboid, a survival crafting horror game, obviously based around zombies. At this point, I think that the zombie survival horror genre is rather played out, and I think that a lot of developers tried to cash in on the success of a few pretty interesting games. So I want to be clear up front for those of you that aren't aware of this game. This is not your typical zombie survival experience. Or maybe it is, depending on what you expect. And yes, I know, another zombie survival crafting horror game. At this point, I feel like that genre is pretty worn out, and developers have put out so many of those games that have all just sort of melded together into this mash, right? But as a whole, I think a lot of popular installments in this zombie survival franchise have pushed themselves towards more action gameplay. I'm thinking of games like Dead Island and Dying Light. And a lot of other zombie survival games have a lot of systems of combat and action that really give the game a sense of tension and stress in the moment. But that's exactly why I love Project Zomboid. They don't rely on the action element of the zombie survival genre to build tension and stress. Instead, they rely on the survival aspects. They rely on situational awareness, skill progression, and all these other things to build tension and stress in the gameplay. Oftentimes in Project Zomboid, your biggest enemies aren't the zombies, it's the lack of supplies or resources that you may encounter in your wasteland traversal. And while I love games like Dying Light and Dead Island and the fun, goofy, intense gameplay that can come from those more action-oriented zombie survival games, I do feel that I've always wanted a survival game that has real, sincere depth to the survival techniques and survival systems. I feel like I found this in Project Zomboid. Like, honestly, this game has a plethora of survival systems that all interlock and intertwine, and every decision that you make while you're playing Project Zomboid has a sort of a rippling effect that carries forward with you, and if you're not careful, a bunch of small bad decisions can lead to your death. This means that you have to be more aware of these survival systems and take them more seriously than you do in other games where they're sort of just an afterthought or like a penalty system in case you don't keep up on them. The great thing about this is that a lot of these things have a sort of innate, realistic sense to them, so what would make sense to do is generally what you should do. If you have a wound, you should treat it for infection, and also, if it's deep enough, possibly stitch it together. And I won't bore you with the details because I could go on and on about the systems in Project Zomboid. There's a ton of them, and I, even after almost 1,000 hours of gameplay, am still learning new techniques, new strategies, and new information about the game, ways to play and ways to survive that I just had no idea about. And while I have a lot of passion for this game, I don't have a lot of footage, and also I don't have a lot of experience covering it. And it's for this reason that I commented on Atomic Duck's most recent video asking for permission to use his channel's footage as sort of like a reactionary style content. Now, I've never done React style content on my channel before, but I figured this is a good place to start because Atomic Duck has been covering Project Zomboid for a long time, has a lot of information about the game. Not only that, he has a Patreon server that's whitelisted for his Patreon contributors where they can all play together in a sort of like PvE environment. And not only that, he has been using money that he gets from his Patreon members to support the construction of mods that they use in their Patreon server to bring a variety of experiences to the game that have never been a part of it prior. And before we get into the React content, I do just want to say I super appreciate what Atomic Duck is doing for the Project Zomboid community, because everyone benefits from this. Everyone, even if you're not a Patreon member, you benefit from the creation of these mods that fundamentally bring a whole new world to the game. But yeah, I just looked down and this was an insane amount of exposition. So I did not realize that I was going on and on for so long. I've never done React content before. I think I'm supposed to just like start the video, right? So I'm just gonna start the video. Okay. All right, so this is the first video out of 2 that we're gonna watch, and it covers a developer blog post where they talk about the upcoming update for the game. Most people are probably unaware, but Project Zomboid has an update cycle where they do a huge patch and they spend a long time, months and months and months building up to it. And in between those huge patches, they do a ton of smaller patches, adding new content, but also primarily focusing on refining what the huge update has brought to the table and iterating on the ideas of that major update. So with no further ado, I'm just gonna, I continued the exposition after, okay. All right, so here we go.
Hi folks, and welcome back to the channel. Now, as some of you may already know, last week's Project Zomboid development blog was delayed a week due to the regular writer being ill. So in this video, I'll be covering the Thursdoid that was dropped on February 16th, 2023. And man, did these guys put in some overtime for this one. There's a lot to cover, so I'm gonna pretty much jump right into this one, starting with some of the more juicy additions. And then towards the second half of the video, I'll be diving into how the devs are looking to tackle optimization and performance improvements. If you find the video useful or informative, be sure to drop it a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one. So, as I've just said, I'm jumping forward in this blog and starting off with the less technical stuff, starting with an update from Blair Algol on the farming system overhaul. Blair has lended several paragraphs to the dev blog this week, so rather than quote and read that all back to you, I'm going to try and condense this down a bit for you like I do with the rest of the blog post. Right. So, Blair opens up this segment by first stating that all of the development with regards to new plants, herbs, vegetables, house plants, and associated farming mechanics are almost to the point of completion. He's now focusing on fine-tuning and applying polish, but before everyone gets too excited...
Okay, so I gotta pause already. I'm sort of new to the React content. I don't even know when I'm gonna pause or like what to do here, but I think I just pause whenever I want. So, the farming system in Project Zomboid currently is extremely basic, and I would say it's pretty rewarding if you carry through with it, but it's quite a chore, and it just feels weird. There's a lack of diversity of crop options, and there's also a lot of weird things. Like you have these indoor plants. In the current version of Project Zomboid, these do not like decompose or anything. You don't have to water them. They just chill. And they're basically just like furniture decorations, right? Which is fine because that's how most games do it. But Project Zomboid always sort of has this sense of realism about things where if you see a plant indoors, you would probably expect that to rot because like meat rots and berries rot and, you know, food rots, everything else perishes. So like the fact that these don't in the current version is kind of weird. Also, they are adding so like you can see here, I'll go back a little bit. You can see they have like new crops that they are planning on adding. But yeah, essentially they are adding new plants, herbs, vegetables, and house plants associating with farming mechanics, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I'll just let them continue here.
Completion. He's now focusing on fine-tuning and applying polish, but before everyone gets too excited, he does say that there's a large challenge ahead of him, as part of this fine-tuning and polish will require some more heavy lifting, as he puts it. The goal with the new reworked system is not just to be more realistic, but also provide a more relaxing and productive feeling gameplay loop associated with farming, whilst utilizing the full capabilities of modern Project Zomboid's animations. Blair has been patiently waiting for Ateron's new fishing rework to be in a state where he can use fish.
Okay, so yeah, farming is going to be a huge update in Project Zomboid. Like currently you can raise plants indoors just on a patch of soil, and there's no downside to not having natural light. They're fixing a lot of systems like that for farming to make it more realistic, but also to make it less frustrating, maybe a little more engaging in a fun way, and a little less tiring, I guess.
As a base layer for building out his own interactions and engagements with farming to try and keep stuff as consistent as possible across all the skills, as well as others like foraging and RJ's new animal.
Okay. So he's talking about a lot of stuff here, but like this fishing thing. So currently fishing, you literally just stand there and you start fishing, and it's just AFK mode. Like you just fish until you're done or something stops you, basically. yeah, there's no mini game, there's no associated anything. A lot of people seem to enjoy that because it's incredibly easy. Like you can go up to a lake here with a fishing rod, and then you can just start fishing, and then like ×3 speed, and you'll get a huge, like you get an absurd amount of fish from doing that. It's kind of ridiculous. Like honestly, I would prefer to have a system where it's more engaging, where you actually feel like you're fishing and you feel like you get the benefits and the rewards of that system. Because right now, as it currently stands, I mean, I know fishing is a fantastic skill to have, like in real life or survival situations, but in terms of a gameplay mechanic for Zomboid right now, it's extremely overpowered. It's just unlimited food for zero effort, and it makes things like foraging and trapping just seem absurd. Like, why would you even want to do trapping when you can just do fishing instead? Okay.
For example, so they can come together as a bit more of a whole experience. The goal
right, so they're adding animals. So in the current version of Project Zomboid, there are no animals. Like there are dead animals. Like you can find like you can do trapping and find like meat of animals, like dead rabbits, and you can butcher them, and you can also get fish, and you can make food out of stuff. So there's like meat and animals in that sense, but there are no live animals out in the world. When you're walking around, it's just you and the zombies, and there are like noises, and you know, like you can hear dogs barking in the background and stuff to give you the sense that there are animals in the world. But to be honest, I think that this next update is it's huge. This is going to be such a big update for the game because it's going to literally breathe new life into the game. Okay, let's continue.
To make them similar, essentially. Blair then goes on to state that his goal is to create an oasis of calm within the post-apocalyptic world of Project Zomboid with a fun, albeit challenging, mini-game experience. Blair then teases us with a new feature that he's been working on, which is the use of ladybugs as pest control. He then points out that in testing,
so that would be huge because right now, currently, like the way farming works is your plants can get sick and you have to treat them yourself. And there's no real automated, you can't like create you can't create an ecosystem that is conducive to fighting off parasites or anything like that. So having more complicated farming mechanics that help your progression with farming to make higher farming levels feel more impactful, stuff like that. Like, I think that would be fantastic. And here's a sheep. Those are obviously new. Those are not in the game currently, but I'm excited to having like livestock and, you know, pets and stuff like that.
The reworked system will still result in most crops making it to a harvestable state without issue, but that crop yields may vary. Following Blair's anecdotes, we get into the juicy part, a list of features that have already been implemented under the system. I'll bring this list up on screen and go through it point by point for you guys now. Firstly, crops now take a realistic amount of time to grow. This can be tweaked, however, in the sandbox settings to be suited to the individual player, which I'd say.
Oh, that's so good. And he says he's glad to see that they're keeping this option available. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Because for like, if you're running a multiplayer server or you're playing single player, your needs vary depending. Like, let's be honest, if you're playing a single player game and it's going to take 18 days of game time to grow like a plot of potatoes or whatever, you know, it's just, you might want to decrease that time a little bit versus a multiplayer server where, you know, I don't know. It's just, it's good to have the option.
Is a pretty important part, so I'm glad they're keeping this option available. Crops will now have realistic growing seasons as well, with some crops having certain months that will see them flourish and others where they are naturally doomed to fail. This, again, can be changed in the sandbox settings.
So this is something I do want to say. He keeps saying sandbox settings. For those of you who don't play Project Zomboid, like in my community specifically, you can balance the entire game. This is one of my favorite parts about Project Zomboid, is that it is a rather hardcore experience, but you can go into the settings and you can change everything. You can change the difficulty, the rarity of loot. You can change whether you die from a zombie bite. You can change a lot of stuff. And I find that it's incredibly nice to be able to tailor the experience to whatever you decide you want to do. You can do casual runs for the sake of learning or improving, or you can do more hardcore runs once you're more situated with the game and you feel like you want to take on a bigger challenge. This also adds to the replayability of the game because having a sandbox mode allows you to feel like you're having a fresh experience every time you load up the game, depending on what you decided to do.
With this rework also comes changes to the location. We'll need to plant crops. If you attempt to grow anything indoors other than houseplants, those crops will ultimately fail. This can be changed in the sandbox settings, and the devs also go on to say that when the new lighting system is implemented, they could look into greenhouses, but not to take this as a guarantee.
Okay, I think that's actually more of like a nudge to the modding community. There's a very active modding community for Project Zomboid, and like that's probably something that a modding community or like a modder could just do. To be totally honest, not that we should expect modders to do things, but like if they implement all this other stuff, it seems like it wouldn't be too hard to have like a greenhouse system mod or something like that. But anyway, these 2 points right here make it clear that they are making some things more difficult with farming. Like not all of it is quality of life, as in it's going to be easier. They are trying to make the system more realistic. Therefore, like there's more to learn about farming. There's more to manage in the sense of like learning, which I think makes the gameplay more satisfying and obviously more realistic.
Just yet. Farmers will now have to deal with slugs and snails as garden pests that can be dealt with using commercial slug and snail killers, or by learning how to make a slug trap out of an empty beer or pop can and some beer. Rosemary plants and chickens will also serve as a means to keep these pests at bay. Plants will benefit from regular weeding sessions. The devs don't say how in this blog, but I'd imagine that this could increase crop yields if the crop is well tended to. Herbs will be implemented, which will have shorter growing seasons and can be repeatedly harvested for resources. Players will also be able to propagate new herb patches with fresh herbs.
Okay, I want to talk about the herb thing real quick because I love the foraging system in the game, and you can forage medicinal herbs that you can use to make like medicinal herbal teas, to make like poultices and stuff like that. And those are great, but sometimes it's like RNG. Foraging is all RNG. And sometimes you just can't find what you need, even though realistically speaking, if it's growing in the area and you look long enough, you should be able to find it. Anyway, this is sort of a workaround seemingly for that system. Like we can probably grow lemongrass. We can probably grow, you know, our own medicinal herbs, as well as maybe some like seasoning herbs that we can grow for cooking and stuff like that. I love this. I think this is awesome. It adds a lot more to your farming experience rather than just having the big food plants.
Whole potatoes, onions, and garlic bulbs will be able to be planted to create new patches of vegetables. Lastly, Blair has added contextual actions to the farming experience when the character is using the combat stance in conjunction with the action key. For example, if you have a hoe equipped and are in combat stance, you can use the action key to dig a furrow. This should make farming a bit less of a menu scrolling experience if that's how players would prefer to do things. Blair also wants to expand this to actions outside of farming, like pulling down barricades from a window when a crowbar is equipped, for example. So that's it for the world of farming in this dev.
Okay, I think that is absolutely, please. I doubt the devs will ever watch this video, but if you do, for some reason, I mean, anything that you can do to remove unnecessary menu interactions to make the game more immersive, I think is for the benefit of the game overall. The less times that we have to like take our, you know, kind of like pause what we're doing to open up a menu to look for a menu option that we need to click is better. It's way more intuitive when you can walk up to something and know like, oh, I can just hold E to do this, or I can tap E to do this. I think, well, playing on keyboard, obviously. But yeah, overall, I think that is a good thing that they are focusing on.
Blog. Next we're over to fishing, and we're treated to 2 different images this week, showcasing both the massive list of new fish being added to the game in Build 42, but also some of their models laid out on a beach next to what I can only imagine is a rather happy fisherman.
Okay, so this is cool. The new fishing system comes with a new mini game, but there's actually, you know, models for all these different kinds of fish. You can live out your fisherman RP a little bit more realistically this way.
Super excited for the new fishing system. We saw some footage of this in the last dev blog, and I'm all for less skills that require absolutely no interaction from the player. I'd much rather be actively involved in a task that I'm completing, so it's good to see some further progress in this department.
Okay, this is actually a little bit of a tangent here, but there are some people that are mad that this system is being changed because it's becoming more difficult, less efficient. I just want to say real quick, there is a plague in the gaming community of people being so obsessed with efficiency and so obsessed with like difficulty that any change in a video game, whether it is good for the game or bad for the game, is viewed entirely from the lens of, does this make my life easier or harder in the game? Like, does this make my efficiency better or worse? And I think that's such a smooth brain way of looking at things, to be totally honest. Like, to play video games is to have fun. It's to play. That's exactly what we're trying to do when we're playing video games. It's like, have a good experience in a video game. And that comes with challenge, overcoming fake risk, that kind of stuff. It's an exciting thing that people like to do. But I see a lot of modern gamers where they tend to be just like taskmasters, like they're obsessed with efficiency and they're obsessed with completing a goal without expending any skill whatsoever, without having to actually lift a finger in response to challenge. Like, they want to skip all of the difficulty. They just want click river, get fish. I mean, this looks more fun. This definitely looks more fun. It looks more engaging. It looks more rewarding. And I think it'll make me actually want to do some fishing in Project Zomboid. Whereas now it's just something that you skip through with the time function,
We also got a fairly sizable bit of footage showing off various animals this week, which is pretty much everything that we've seen in various blogs so far combined into one clip. We see pigs, chickens, cows, sheep, and various activities associated with.
Okay, we have not seen any cats or dogs. I mean, I guess dogs are cool too, but like, if they don't add cats to this game,
keeping animals too, like
a real
filling
shame.
a feed trough and shearing a sheep of its wool. Also, footage of a man getting his ass handed to him by a cow and then killing said cow. Personally, I'd be up for giving the cow a knife to see who wins that fight, but anyway, we'll move on as we've got some more stuff from Blair. This time, Blair is talking to the writer about a lot of new items and functions that come with them.
Okay, look at this. This is so cool. I saw this. You see the character walk out of a thing, and then you see like, look, there's like rats and spiders and stuff, and they scurry. They scurry, guys. I can't describe how much that excites me. Like, this game, the world, I know this is gonna be a super pun, but it feels so dead. Like, it feels like it's just you and the zombies, and having this interplay of like, what you're doing is not only affecting how the zombies react and engage with you, but it also will affect the animals around. And maybe the animals will also have some interactions with the zombies where maybe the noises the animals make draw zombies. So you want to be careful about what you're doing around certain animals in case you spook them, because then they could make noise, which could draw zombies. And like, I think it adds a whole new layer of gameplay that I'm super excited about.
That he's been working on. Someone needs to get Blair another coffee, because since he's joined the team, he's really been putting in some work, and kudos to him for that. There's also a video that comes with this section, which I'll leave playing in the background as I talk about the items. He starts by discussing what he calls bottleneck items, things like generator magazines or sledgehammers that would prevent the player from progressing to a certain part of the game without them. Whilst the developers aren't looking to remove these items or the challenge of finding them, they do want to ensure that there are adequate opportunities for players to find them, even if it involves putting your character in a dangerous situation. The idea.
Okay, so my idea for this would be like to let us have improvised version. Like, okay, I know what they're gonna do. They're gonna say like, okay, there are certain areas of the game where we can sort of dictate spawns of specific items, but they're in a challenging area to get to, so they're protected by a ton of zombies or whatever. That's cool. But I mean, if they're doing a crafting overhaul, give us a way to craft these things, give us a way to make like improvised sledgehammers. It doesn't have to last forever. It doesn't have to be as durable as a normal sledgehammer. But if we can like, get some iron bars and get some concrete and just craft a crappy sledgehammer that gets the job done, then that would work. It's just an idea for the more survival aspect of it. You know, like, I know that they're doing a lot on crafting, but it would be cool if some of these bottlenecked items were something that you could craft in some way to get past that bottleneck situation instead of having to go somewhere to get it.
Here is to include these items in some randomly generated story scenes that you might come across in vehicles or in stash houses marked on annotated maps. You can
Right, so you might find a map in game where, like, you open the map and it says, hey, sledgehammer right here at house, and then you go to the house and boom, there's a sledgehammer.
Find in game. Some of these items could also be foraged. Blair then mentions that the loot tables are also...
I don't like the foraging idea. Maybe people can let me know what you think about this. I guess in the zombie apocalypse, there would be stuff strewn on the ground, and occasionally you might find something like useful strewn on the ground. But I think the idea of just like running around with foraging active, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, look, a saw. Oh, look, a hammer. Oh, look, a shotgun. Oh, look, a pop can. Oh, look. You know, it's just, I think these are items that we should find as they like, we should find them existing in the world, or in loot containers, or we should craft them. I don't like the idea of using the foraging system, which I feel like should primarily be for, like, you know, raw materials, you know, food, that kind of stuff, you know, real basic stuff, medicinal herbs, like I mentioned earlier, insects even. And once they add the animals, maybe small animals like rats or mice or something like that. I don't know. I don't know exactly how that'll work, but it just, if you're running around and there's no sledgehammer, and then you turn on your foraging thing and all of a sudden there's a sledgehammer at your feet that you just somehow didn't notice before, like, that just seems super weird, especially because they're modeled. They have a 3D model in the game. So, like, I don't know. Maybe someone can let me know what you think about that. I just think it's kind of weird.
Also undergoing a scrupulous revision and glow up right now, which should provide more fun and depth to the looting aspects of the game. Looking forward to seeing how that turns out. Loot tables are always going to be one of those things that are very tricky to balance due to the random nature of how they work and the different sandbox options, so I'm always up for revisions on this, and I'm looking forward to see how it turns out. Tools like the loot log, which Blair has already made, serves to write any loot that spawns into a text file where it can later be reviewed by the developers, or modders in some cases. Fenris has now expanded upon this design, which means that the tool now tracks and logs exactly how many items of each type spawn for each save game. This is a permanent record showing exactly how many items have spawned. The use of this, according to Blair, is to allow the developers to collect concrete data regarding item spawning, which can then, of course, help them balance loot spawns of key items like sledgehammers, rubber hoses, generators, stuff like that.
Okay, so essentially what I think is being said here is, like, the loot is obviously dictated by RNG. Like, there's a loot table and RNG decides what spawns. But there are times when you would expect to find certain loot in certain locations at a certain, like, frequency. Like, if you go through an entire neighborhood and no one has a garden hose, it's kind of like, okay, well, maybe someone looted all these garden hoses but like, you would think that some of these people would have garden hoses, right? So they can get an idea of how things are actually being distributed in the game world, and then maybe they can come up with fixes for these important items like sledgehammers, hoses, saws, you know, things like that, where you would expect to find them quite commonly because they're extremely useful items, like within the world, you know, within people's homes or within people's, you know, places or whatever. But yeah. But that's also hard to balance for the sake of difficulty, because if they become too common, then that does take out one of the major aspects of difficulty in the game, where it feels like once you have everything you need, a lot of the difficulty goes away, because most of the difficulty in this game is in the survival elements, like I mentioned, not in like an action combat kind of scenario. Even though the combat is very tense in this game, it is difficult and it is challenging and rewarding in its own way. Once you get over the survival hurdle, it gets a lot more boring. So that's been kind of like an issue with Project Zomboid lately.
In regards to generators specifically, in build 42 we'll also be able to bypass the need for generator magazines if our electrical skill is a high enough level. That level requirement isn't mentioned specifically here, but I do like this. It gives us another reason to grind the electrical skill and makes perfect sense for the setting. There's also new varieties of lighters, matches, and lighter fluids that can be used to refill the classic lighters. Vehicles will now have lighters, and I know this will be a big one for many players that use a particular mod. You'll now be able to light cigarettes on open flames or on appropriate stoves. Blair has also added some alternative items for users of the smoker trait to feed their nicotine addiction. Now, smoker is already a really easy trait to manage in Project Zomboid, so I'm actually interested to see how this will be balanced from here, although there's no mention of that in this post.
Honestly, like, okay, a smoker is overpowered. It's way too easy to be a smoker in Project Zomboid because there's basically no downside. A little bit of inconvenience for a lot of skill points is kind of what you get. And I think that maybe if smoking in the game actually did negatively affect your health over time, it would be more of a deterrent, where it's one of those things where it's like, yes, you do get a benefit from continuously smoking because you don't have any panic or stress. It actually does relieve stress that you didn't get from not smoking. So being a smoker actually kind of does make you less stressed in general, which maybe in a realistic sense, that's why people use nicotine, is for stress, I guess. So like, I guess that might make sense, but you know, it should have negative downsides. It should make your character really sick occasionally. Like maybe if you're a smoker and you have that trait, you have a chance of getting randomly very sick. Or I've seen people have the thing where it's like, you should have a smoker's cough. And maybe if your character's been a smoker for a long time, you know, you'd have like a little bit of a cough, a little bit of like a thing going on. And so that would draw zombies because they actually have like a cough and flu kind of system in the game already. There's a lot of things that they could do to balance smoking, I think, to make it more realistic.
Some new varieties of gas storage are being added in the form of larger jerry cans, with some military-themed items as well. Along those same lines, some more themed bags are included. Blair compares these to the military duffel bags added in build 41, giving a shout out to the roleplayers on Project Zomboid who he knows will benefit from unique themed wearables. A new entrenching tool has been added, which functions as a weapon and a shovel in one item, which can also be folded and attached to a belt. Several new knives have been added too, the examples given being the switchblade and butterfly knife. We've got a new canteen item that can be attached to the player's belt with a
That's awesome. Canteen item, that's fantastic. A lot of these are really good additions to the game. I don't have a lot to say about them because they're just like, yep, that's good.
a few different cosmetic variants of the item itself. There's now a P38 can opener that you can keep on your keyring, and additionally,
Oh my gosh, thank you, because carrying around the can opener is important. You should have a can opener, but like, why do you need this giant can opener? Like, can't you just get like a keyring opener? You know what I mean? I've always thought that was weird.
players will be able to use a knife to open cans of food from build 42. This will, however, damage the knife and risk injury to the player's hand. There's some new alcoholic items like imported beer that will require a bottle opener, better wines, and champagne, which will need either a corkscrew or a pocket knife to open. There are now a bunch of vanity and collectible items that are being added for players to collect for those that like to set themselves additional goals. And lastly, we see in some of the footage that Blair uses the pickaxe item.
I don't know what that means. Items for additional goals, like, just, it seems like random stuff. Like there's stuffed animals in the game that you can collect or whatever. Yeah, I mean, that's all cool.
To remove tree stumps and boulders if you'd like to do some tidying around your safe house. Now, it's
so funny to me that Project Zomboid is missing a lot of the core gameplay that is built into a lot of survival games. And what I mean by that is, like, currently in Project Zomboid, if you take out a hoe and you try to hit the ground, you know, like, you can't make a furrow in the ground. Like, you can't do it. You can't hit rocks with a pickaxe to mine ore from them. There's a little bit of it. You can cut down trees, you know, you can, yeah. But I just think that's kind of funny that they're like, after years and years of development, finally Project Zomboid is getting, you can hit rocks with a pickaxe.
most of the juicy new additions and mechanics being brought to the game in Build 42 that are covered in this dev blog. But there was a huge section of this dev blog dedicated to the new chunk-based rendering using a depth map, which is supposed to be a huge optimization improvement for the game. So if you're one of those people experiencing low FPS or stutters in your game, you're going to be interested in this next part. I will say that this gets pretty in-depth. And
okay, I do want to say real quick, like, I know that this game isn't graphically intense looking, but when you're in big areas, and since a lot of this stuff is rendered in game with 3D models, even though a lot of it's in loot containers, there's just a lot of items to keep track of in the game files. And so when you're in big areas, like a huge city with big buildings with a ton of stuff, ton of zombies, ton of stuff, it can lag people's computers quite heavily to be in those areas, especially if you're moving very quickly in like a vehicle or something, because the game is trying to render that stuff and keep up with you as you move and update information as you pass through.
Is very technical, so much so that I want to preface this by saying I will be basically condensing and regurgitating this information. I have no development experience, and as such, this stuff is really outside of my wheelhouse. There are aspects of this that I certainly don't understand, so don't feel stupid if you don't either. Seriously, this is like pages of stuff, so if you want to give it a more proper read, there is a link in the description to the blog, but I'll do my best.
Yeah, so I don't understand this stuff either. I might actually skip past his explanation of it, no offense to him, simply because I already watched it and I didn't understand it either. But what I gathered from it was depth, you know, this thing that they're doing, good. And that makes me happy. So here we are.
Forgotten, there was some footage shared a while back which shows max zoom, 4K resolution footage from Zomboid running at between 300 and 500 FPS. This is a result of the new systems that we've just discussed. The devs do say that the improvement on the player's side may not be this huge, as in this footage there were no zombies and some other things were at play, but that it's a good indication of quite how massive this improvement should be. So it's exciting.
I mean, that's fantastic. I don't have any issues running Zomboid on my computer because it's a very powerful computer, but I'm all for making the game more accessible to people on all sorts of devices that may not be as powerful as my computer.
Exciting stuff, really, whether you understand the complexities or not. From here, the developers showcase some new experiments going on with EP at the moment, who is working on an editor for creating simple 3D shapes, positioning them on tiles, and baking out the depth texture for use when rendering. The developers do say that this cannot be confirmed for Build 42 just yet, and that it's highly experimental, but they did want to show this off anyway with that disclaimer. I honestly don't quite understand the fundamentals behind this new system. It's all in the dev blog for those that want to give it a full read, but it is specifically mentioned that this would solve the major barrier that has been stopping the devs from adding sitting, lying in beds, and so on. They do.
Yeah, okay, so one thing he mentioned before he explained everything is that, like, Project Zomboid is a 2D game. It looks like you're in a top-down perspective, and it looks like there's depth, so to speak, in the game, but there's not. It's an illusion that is created by you know, the graphics of the game and the way that the graphics are done. So for that reason, it's really difficult to animate certain things like laying or sitting or doing certain directional kinds of movement animations because, well, you're not in a three-dimensional world, and it can kind of make it look really janky or destroy the illusion that that is created. And if this stuff can get around that or fix it or do whatever, I mean, that's so good. And that might lead to the potential of making it easier for modders to do animations and stuff like that.
Say there's no way this new system could be applied to every tile in the game, as many of them were hand-drawn by artists and they may not follow the strict laws of isometric game design. Still, this tech could be used to make some pretty cool advancements in the future. So hopefully all that wasn't too much to take in. That's it from me in this one, and if you have any questions or want to share your thoughts on this blog post, drop a comment below and let me know. I'll be going through them, and I'm almost sure the developers will be lending their ear to the comments on this one too, on account of it being a lot more complex than a lot of the recent blogs. So let's hear your thoughts. Special thank you to all of my
okay, so yeah, like, that is the first video out of 2 that we are watching in this video right now, and just I think this is so exciting because it's going to change a lot of things in the game that I think will draw even more people into the experience. Just the simple addition of animals alone is a huge thing for Project Zomboid, but all the other things they're doing, like they're doing a crafting overhaul where they're adding like workbenches and all sorts of new crafting end game style systems. They're also doing a lot of stuff that you saw in this video specifically, and you can see that the developers have an attention to detail. And now that is both a blessing and a curse because, you know, if they can pay attention to the detail, then so can we. And I know a lot of people love to point out some of the things that, like I pointed out, it took them, how long have they, it's been forever since they've started developing this game, like what, 9-10 years or something like that. And they're just now adding hitting boulders with a pickaxe. Like, that's brand new content to Project Zomboid. And that's funny in a way to me. I find that funny because what they're trying to do is so complicated and has so much depth. And so it would make sense that they could miss stuff like that, or stuff like that could take an excessively long time. I mean, they've gotten caught up in all sorts of development rabbit holes in this game, which have made the game grow and grow and grow over the years. But obviously, if there's something that bothers you about the game and it takes a long time for it to get fixed, it can be extremely frustrating. But that's why I also want to shout out the modding community for Project Zomboid. Everyone that does mods for Project Zomboid, you are freaking amazing. You are a godsend, because modding Project Zomboid takes it from a good game to a great game, in my opinion. I think it's a good game. Like, base vanilla Project Zomboid is a good game, good experience. But when you add mods and you build up on the vanilla experience, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. Okay, so we're gonna go into the next video, which is the one that I'm more excited about. I mentioned earlier that Atomic Duck does mods for his Patreon whitelisted server. He's been commissioning mods for a while now from modders in the Project Zomboid community. Specifically, he's done like a stalker wipe, which was really cool, essentially trying to recreate the stalker experience in Project Zomboid to the best of their abilities. Obviously, we don't have like NPCs and stuff in the game right now, but they even managed to create shops out of like mannequins to create almost a pseudo NPC like experience. A lot of really creative ideas and experiences that came together to create a very interesting experience that anyone can do now. If you started a Project Zomboid server, you could create a stalker themed server because Duck has essentially funded that mod from the support of his community. So anyway, Atomic Duck made a video kind of, you know, shooting the idea out there of like, hey, what if we tried to take Project Zomboid and build a more MMO kind of style experience? Like, it already has multiplayer, it has servers, and you could theoretically see a sort of like long-term massive multiplayer online progression system that's built around RPG elements that is also a social system, and yeah, all sorts of fun stuff. Like, you could see that existing in Project Zomboid. I think I could see that existing in Project Zomboid, like, quite easily, honestly. So anyway, Atomic Duck has decided to go for it and build the mods and start trying to create an MMO experience. I think this is just such a cool thing, and I just have to share it with you all.
Hi folks, and welcome back to the channel. Now, those of you that have seen some of my recent videos may remember that I discussed an idea with you guys regarding the setup of an MMORPG theme for Project Zomboid and how it might be possible using the modding community. Well, in short, I've decided to go ahead with the idea. So in this video, I'll give you a very brief recap of the MMORPG theme and show you guys the progress that has been made so far. Before that though, a message from this video's sponsor.
Watch through the segment so that it helps his analytics.
For a quick recap, these are the things we were looking to achieve.
Okay. So he did a video basically saying like, hey, these are the things that I would see in an MMORPG that I would want to see in Project Zomboid in order for it to be an MMORPG. I'll turn the captions back on in a second. So here they are. They're crafted, armor, weapons, all that other stuff. So yeah.
As part of an MMORPG setup for Project Zomboid. Some of these provide more challenge than others, and I'm not going to dive into too much detail other than showing you this list, but if you want a full rundown, I'll leave a link to my previous video about all of this in the description. I was actually overwhelmed by the positive responses that we got on that last video, so I want to say a huge thank you to you guys for that. And equally, I want to thank those that left negative comments on the video doubting that this was possible. Not that I'm a petty person or anything, and I may or may not be telling porkies there, but the thought of proving those people wrong pushed me to get the ball rolling. The first thing we chose to tackle was the quest system. Now, without this, we'd be missing a key component of MMORPGs, and ultimately wouldn't be able to achieve the feel that we wanted for this whole thing. For this, we needed an experienced modder with some high quality work behind them, and we've got just that. Soulfilcher, who some of you may know for his mod like Soulfilcher's Awesome Time or Farming Time, is working on a quest system completely from scratch that fits directly into the current UI of Project Zomboid. It turns out that Soul had actually...
Oh my gosh. I gotta say that this a questing system in Project Zomboid would help so much with the new player experience. I know this is talking about an MMO kind of thing, but like essentially like you just get dropped into the world and it's like go, you know, but having this kind of quest story lore element could be so interesting. Like every class, well, he'll talk about it, but like, you know, currently we have professions in games. So like you're a police officer or a burglar or a farmer or whatever. And wouldn't it be so cool if you spawned into Project Zomboid and you had a specific, I guess, optional quest line that you could take based on your profession that sort of leads you into the world of Project Zomboid and maybe gives you some interesting information about your profession? And I don't know.
been working on this already and was able to set up a test run for me to see the capabilities of the system. Needless to say, I was pleasantly surprised by what the system could do. I was expecting basic quests like kill 10 zombies or bring me X amount of items, but it was actually much more complex than that. In the test run, there were quests assigned to a given occupation. There were timed actions like making a phone call that would actually draw over nearby zombies. I had to collect items from bodies, take photos, stash items in a hiding place, and much more. The quests were conveniently stored in its own tab under the character information panel, and objectives updated with each completed step, showing which objectives I'd completed already.
Also, I think it's hilarious that they're using the drinking animation for the telephone call. I don't blame them because there's not a lot of animations to choose from, but that's pretty funny. But this is all really interesting. I think this is so cool. It can make you feel a little more present in the world and like your character actually existed in the world
as well. All in all, this test was a huge success and showed that there was going to be some real potential in the sorts of quest objectives that we could give to players. Meaningful stories that could be built, and each could be displayed in an easy to find area of the existing interface. Now, there are some tweaks that we're going to make. One of the biggest I'd like to add being the opportunity to listen to dialogue or additional information from the quest giver. The hope is that this can provide optional depth for those that want to read into the story, without forcing players to click through several boxes of dialogue. It can just be displayed in the quest information if you'd like to give it a read, similar to games like World of Warcraft if you're familiar with how they handle quests. To make sure the quests are varied and the stories themselves,
yeah, like context would be important for the quest. I think that would be helpful. Like a lot of this stuff is kind of, it's like take a picture of an infected person, take a sample, write a report, wait for a message. And like that's all cool and all, but like, you know, maybe a little more context about how your character might be potentially reacting to all this stuff, just some more thoughts and feelings kinds of things. I don't know.
has some real substance to them. I've asked for the help of a friend of mine who will remain nameless but is a writer by trade in the video games industry. I'll be writing these quests alongside them, and we've already come up with some killer quest lines to follow. Each of the classes we're planning to add, which we'll get into shortly, will have a main quest line. From there will be quest lines available at settlements to complete for XP and other rewards. Side quests, essentially. The quests themselves will be, with some exceptions, through items provided by quest givers. These quest givers will be housed at settlements around the map. The settlements themselves are being designed and constructed by our very own Simon MD, who has been responsible for many of the map mods we've added in previous setups to provide a hub for players to.
I will say these personally crafted areas I think are super cool in Project Zomboid. I love seeing it. I love seeing the detail that people put into like putting this stuff together. Like they just have like a bunch of appliances stuffed over here. You know what I mean? Like that's so cool.
interact with traders, quest givers, or just other players. The images you're seeing on screen are some of his past works, and this one in particular is of the very first settlement that will be part of the MMORPG theme. I look forward to sharing
Now this place looks like I wouldn't want to be here.
some more sneak previews of
Definitely gives you sort of like Fallout vibes, you know?
these settlements as they develop a little bit more. Now, I've mentioned traders a couple of times already, and thankfully this part of our setup has already been completed. For those of you that remember our stalker themed mod collection, we commissioned Chuck to build a shops and traders mod. This comes with fully functional currency, trading of currency between players and vendors that will stock set amounts of items, refresh at timed intervals set to your preference, and even sell items that players sell to them. That's if you want to enable this feature for specific vendors, of course. Now, I don't want to take away the benefits of looting, but we do want to offer players an alternative way to acquire certain items, sell things that they don't need, or purchase things required as part of our new crafting overhaul. And that brings me nicely onto our reworked crafting. One of the biggest parts of MMORPGs, in my mind, are the crafting elements.
Okay, so all of that looks great. Like, all of these maps look great. The vendors are great. That's all great. Like, I don't even have anything to like say about it, really. I am curious. The reason why I said I wouldn't want to be here is because like these walls look flimsy. You know, like this is like a level 1 metal wall in game. And I'm curious about like, has the durability of these been adjusted, or is this actually like a level 1 metal wall for the entire structure? Because yeah, I don't know. I'm interested in that. Other than that, I mean, it seems really cool.
Parts of MMORPGs, in my mind, are the crafting elements. Almost every MMO handles this differently, but to me, the most important aspects are the interactions with other players, with different crafting skills to your own, and providing an actual reward to the crafting itself. I see so many games where crafted weapons and armor are available, but almost always stuff you acquire through quests are better than the crafted alternatives. So players perceive the crafting as nothing more than a grind.
Yeah, absolutely. This is 110% true. And I think that in a zombie survival game, you know, where things are deteriorating over time, crafting should be an important aspect of it, because you should be able to create things that are not deteriorated with your crafting skills
that they have to push through to get to the good stuff at the end. We're hoping to ensure that this isn't the case with our theme. We've started with crafted weaponry. Yaki, the creator of Yaki's makeshift clothing and other popular cosmetic mods, has started modeling some weapons for each of the weapon skills in Project Zomboid, such as spears or long blunt, each with 4 varieties ranging from a low tier makeshift weapon up to a masterwork weapon crafted by the finest weaponsmith. Players will need to acquire higher level crafting skills and, most importantly, progress their crafting skill questline to unlock tools or other items to allow them to craft the next tier of weaponry. I'm planning—
This is so cool, by the way. Like, I just think it's very satisfying. You can see the progression of the weapon getting more intricate and stuff like that. Like, that's very satisfying.
Expand on the weapons available at a later stage, but for now, one for each weapon skill is a good way to start. We've also found that it's possible to change the existing crafting skills in the game, move recipes around to other areas, and add our own crafting skills to the game itself. Now, with that in mind, we're going to rework the crafting skills to be more reminiscent of an MMO experience. The players will be able to choose 2 primary skills on character creation, whilst having access to all of the secondary skills in our setup. The images you're seeing on screen are from a mod developed by Champy, which allows players to select their 2 chosen primary skills. This is going to make it much easier for the quest system to identify which skills players have when setting up which quests are available to them, and we're going to be putting in different quests for different chosen skills. We're also replacing the existing occupations entirely with more MMO themed class choices.
All right, I love the idea of replacing the occupations with classes, because I think that the occupations are cool when you're first getting started, but they actually don't make as big of a difference as you would think, because every occupation can level up every skill, and while you get EXP bonuses to different skills depending on your occupation, in the long run, none of it just really matters. It feels more like a flavor kind of thing, except for a few occupations that have like special perks that other classes just don't get, or other occupations don't get. But having more of a class-like system, I think, would bring maybe a little more individuality to each individual character, where certain characters will be able to perform acts and craft. Like if you have an armor smith, they can craft armor. If you don't have an armor smith, you can't craft armor. Like I think that's like that dividing line is a good thing to have in an MMO experience for a lot of reasons. It creates demand in a market. Like if you have 10 people playing on a server, you want one of them at least to be an armor smith, and then people go to the armor smith for armor, and then they don't have to be an armor smith. They can be something else, like a weaponsmith. And that kind of system works really well for MMORPGs.
Which will allow us to allocate the proper points required to select 2 primary skills as well. We're not ready to show these off just yet, but they are under construction, so more on that in a coming progress update. Skills are displayed in the same place they are in vanilla Project Zomboid, except now they are broken down into primary and secondary skill groups, and only the 2 primary skills that you pick will be displayed here. Keep in mind that the skills you see here might be adjusted later down the line, but for now, these are the ones that we've landed on as we move forward. Again, the idea behind this system is to provide a varied experience each time players create a new character, and facilitate trade between players as they look to acquire items they can't make for themselves. On a bit of a side note here, this is a similar direction the devs are hoping to go with their big crafting rework, so it'll be interesting to see how this can work ahead of those big changes.
That does make me a little nervous, Duck. That does make me a little nervous. Like, I hope that these mods don't conflict with what the developers are trying to do. It might be better to finish this project when the big update has actually come out, but I mean, that could be another month or two. So, I'm not sure, you know, but I do think that the timing is a little bit awkward. I hope that there's no conflict and that everything works smoothly in conjunction with the new update, to be honest.
Now, I didn't want to restrict some of the activities that make Project Zomboid what it is, so when it came to secondary skills, I wanted to make sure things like building a safe house, cooking meals, or using any of the more survival-oriented skills were available to everyone. You can learn as many of these skills as you like, just like in vanilla, but when it comes to things with a crafting output, like making armor, weapons, or other useful items to the character, you'll have to choose which is most important to you. Alongside weapons, we're also going to provide some crafted clothing and armor sets.
Yeah, that's really cool. I see the armor being used in here and the stuff that they've shown in the thing. They look good. I mean, the armor sets look good. The weapons look good. I think that they look more exciting than what's in the game currently, and would probably add a bit to the combat here. He's going to show some more.
Has already been working with us for our Dark Ages theme, which is currently running on our whitelisted Patreon server, and for that we had a bunch of crafted clothing and armor added. Zombies will spawn with tattered rags that provide no physical protection, and clothing stores are empty.
That's great. The fact that zombies always spawn with, like, you can always find something usable on a zombie really kind of makes crafting not that useful. But if the zombies are wearing destroyed clothing, you know, you would expect something that's rotted and all this stuff. Like, you wouldn't want to wear their clothes. Like, if it's really a zombie just picking up their jacket and throwing it on, like, it's probably not the best idea, right? Probably wouldn't be too sanitary. So a lot of this stuff is really cool, and I also like the more medieval themed things, because I feel like if an apocalypse really did happen, we wouldn't go back to the level of standards of clothing that we have in modern society, because we wouldn't have that level of industry. Like, we would be you'd go back to wearing tunics and stuff like that, you know what I mean? Because they're just easier to make. They're just more readily available, you know. Like, you would have more medieval looking stuff because that's the kind of level of quality of craftsmanship that would be most common in the world, rather than having, you know, factories pumping out like perfect t-shirts and stuff like that. And then having smiths and armor smiths and stuff to make these like specialty armors and gears. Like, I think all of that is really cool.
Or get them from others who can craft them. Flax can be found in seed form and grown in a crop plot, which is then spun into linen at a loom and made into fabric with weaving tools at a tailoring bench.
That's all really cool.
There's also options to dye the fabric using items found through foraging or looting. This proved to us that crafting benches were definitely possible to use.
This is so awesome. This is going to bring a lot. Like, you could build on this over time to add so many different like fashion options that would make Fashion Zomboid a huge deal.
Used during crafting processes with just the use of mods. Whilst we're focusing on weapons at the moment, the plan will be to add more armor and crafted clothing for the MMORPG theme. Since we've already got the base systems and a few different sets already available with their own benefits, we figured it best to focus on weapons for now to expand what's possible with crafting. Now, this next part is one that I'm quite excited about. If you've been keeping your eye on the Steam Workshop lately, you might have seen a mod from Champy, who I mentioned earlier, called Weapons Modifiers. Each weapon you find in the world has a chance to spawn with a certain rarity. Now, rarity will then affect the stat modifiers of the weapon, and naturally, this gives higher rarity weapons better stats possibilities. When I saw this mod, I absolutely had to include it in our...
Oh my gosh. This made me so excited, okay? Because oftentimes, if you find an item that you're looking for, it's like you get that hit of dopamine, but then that's it. It's like, oh, I got the thing I needed. That's it. I'm done. I love the idea of being able to craft with different rarities or find items of different rarities to kind of give more nuance to that system where it's like, oh, I found, you know, a knife. Cool. But it's like, oh, I found a legendary knife or whatever the rarity system is going to be for this game, and it's like does more damage, or it has, you know, a faster attack speed or something like that, and that would kind of add to that feeling, and also it would make that specific item feel more valuable to you. It's like you want to hold on to that knife, you want to repair that knife, because like something that happens to me a lot in Project Zomboid is like once I'm like a month or two into my save file and I'm just chilling, I'm just surviving, I'm just doing really well, I'll have like 20 crowbars, you have like 30 machetes, you know, and it like depends on your loot rarity and all that stuff, of course, but after a while you just have a lot of the same item. Like you'll have like a ton of different of the same item, and it really doesn't feel like there's any point to that because you can only carry one crowbar at a time. You can only wield one crowbar at a time. And while eventually you're going to want to ditch your old crowbar for a new crowbar, having 20 different crowbars that are all exactly the same, it would feel a lot better if there was more nuance to it, where it's like, oh, I have this one crowbar that's got more crit chance and it's my favorite crowbar versus this other crowbar I found, which is just like trash crowbar. You know what I mean? Like, I like that. It adds a lot. It adds a lot.
MMO theme. It just made sense. Champy is now working with us on the theme, meaning we can create a slightly different version if we need to, and we have the ability to adjust rarity spawns, making weapons found in the world have a lower chance at being higher rarities, whereas crafted weapons might have higher chances of being higher rarities. It also encourages players to craft more and make weapons until they find something that suits their character build, essentially crafting with a random element. Something I do want to emphasize here as well is that I'll be looking into the dismantling of weapons if they don't suit what a player needs, so they can break them down into a portion of the usable materials that were used to craft in the first place.
Okay, that's also fantastic. A disassembling system, like having raw materials for the crafting and then being able to disassemble created things back into raw materials. Beautiful idea.
Hopefully more on that in the future. So, as you guys can see at this point in the video, we've started to work on a lot of different elements of this overhaul or setup, or whatever you want to call it. But what do we have left that we want to implement, which hasn't been started yet? As much as I love talking about what we've been able to accomplish so far, I think it's equally important for me to be transparent with you folks about what the difficulties might be behind certain systems, or what we haven't been able to find modders for yet. The largest of these items of work that we haven't been able to find a modder for just yet is a leveling system with gainable XP and a talent point system. This will be a pretty big undertaking for any modder, so it's natural really that this has been something I've struggled to find someone to complete. To my knowledge, this sort of thing hasn't been done in the past and will require both a brand new system designed from scratch and custom UI elements to display that system. The vision here is for players to start with no traits or bonuses outside outside of those given to their class on spawn, but for players to be able to work towards these things using talent points granted to them with each level they gain. Essentially, it's a progression system, which would be kept on death to ensure that even if you die, you're not starting from ground zero, which, whilst I appreciate is a big part of vanilla Zomboid, it doesn't really fit for an MMO theme. The next big thing we're looking to implement...
I think some people will probably fight you on that, to be honest. Like, I think that permadeath is such a big part of Project Zomboid in the gameplay and stuff, but like, I understand for an actual MMO, although some people may argue that, like, I did think about it like this. So like, let's assume you have a settlement, right? And it's got like 10 people in it, and you've got a doctor, and you've got an armor smith, and you've got all this other stuff. Well, if someone gets, I don't know, attacked and they get hit, like hurt or whatever, and they come back and the doctor tries to treat them and they fail and the person dies, it does kind of break the immersion of that situation if the person just spawns back and it's like, oh, hey, Gary, glad you're back from the dead. You know what I mean? Like, I do think that some people will prefer to have the permadeath and to just start over. So maybe having that be an optional thing is probably to the benefit of the modding situation, where it's like something you can tick on, tick off in a menu, or it can be an optional thing to interact with, where it's like when you die, you drop like a journal that contains all of your skills, and you don't have to read it when you respawn, but maybe you do want to read it to just start off where you were. I know that there is a mod already which has sort of like a journal that you can write all your progress in, and then if you die and respawn, you can just read the journal and get all your skills and your progress back. Because I totally understand that some people don't want it to be that hardcore. Like, if they make a mistake and they die, they don't want to have to start all over, especially if it's a long progression system. So it's interesting. It's interesting. I think there will be people that want it both ways, to be totally honest.
Which we haven't sourced a modder for as of yet, at least in part, is group content, specifically dungeons. We'd like to add some gate-kept areas of the map, which require either progress past a certain quest to enter the area, or a certain item which can only be gained through certain means.
Now, I love the idea. I love this. I love this. This is such a cool idea, like quarantine zones, or just like locked safe houses that are like so well put together, like you need a key to get in, like bunkers, stuff like that. Like, there could be so many different locations that you could put throughout the map to have just big loot stashes or something like that, where it's a unique scenario. That's a super cool idea.
Now, the cool thing about map modding is that we can design areas like this already, and we can determine specifically what loot spawns in the area or how many zombies spawn there. We can build the illusion of an underground area by encasing the player in a confined space, and with the creative use of certain tiles to make it look like you're inside of, let's say for argument's sake, an abandoned mine. The tricky part is how the player enters the area. Mods like the basement mod have accomplished this, but so far, I've been unable to reach anyone that can help us with this on our side of things. So fingers crossed, I'll have some good news on this.
Okay, honestly though, I don't think that's a big deal. Like, I think there's so much that you could do with above world dungeons. Imagine there's loot on the top of a 20-story apartment complex. Like, that would be crazy. And that would also be intense. And, you know, you could have like these military encampments. There's so many places where you could already put dungeon-esque style experiences. I wouldn't even worry about like basements or mines or whatever. Like, I'm sure that once the game can support that kind of thing, you'll already have a system where it'll be easy to like include those into your modding system. But yeah, that's really cool
the next time I speak to you guys, but we know it's definitely not impossible to create dungeons as group content inside of Project Zomboid. It'll be even easier when we get to build 42 and have 31 levels both below and above ground to play around with. So that's it for the progress update from the MMORPG theme, but I'd really like to hear from you guys on this one in the comments.
I've been recording forever. This has been way longer than I thought it would be. I'm probably gonna have to cut down this a bunch. Again, thank you, Duck, for, you know, making these videos and making these mods possible for the community. Like, I think that's super great of you. I'm very excited for all of it. I think that particularly the skill system will be interesting to see, and the class system will be really interesting to see. I think there's a lot of potential to make multiplayer experiences more exciting with this MMO mod kind of style thing. And I think also it'll pace the progression better, because I find in a lot of multiplayer servers, some people are real go-getters and they'll kind of get everything done really early. And then, you know, you could do it yourself, but you could also just ask that person for like a rifle or something because they have like 20 rifles, right? So there's sort of this system where in current Project Zomboid multiplayer, it's really easy to kind of hit the end game state, right? In this, you can manage the progression a lot better with an MMO style mod experience. And I think that that could stretch out the progression to make it a lot more exciting over the long term. Okay, but I'm gonna wrap this up and I'm gonna go, and I think that it's a great mod. It's great. I'm super excited for Project Zomboid. I think over the next couple years, this game is going to turn into the best zombie survival experience in a certain way. Obviously, if you want a super action fueled Dying Light style experience, then maybe you just want to go play Dying Light. But for people that really like the nitty-gritty survival, sort of interlocking systems and realistic survival mechanics and all this other stuff, then Project Zomboid should be on your radar if you're not already playing it. That's all I gotta say about that. If you actually watched this whole thing, to anyone that did, like, congratulations, I don't know, but you should buy the game if you haven't. I mean, it goes on sale a lot, but I would just buy it at full price because I think it's only like 20-30 bucks or something like that, and it's totally worth it. The developers have put so much love into this game. So yeah, like, comment, subscribe, do all that wonderful stuff to the channel. I got stuff down there, you got, you know, whatever stuff, and there's a Discord. The link is in the description of the video. Yeah, I've got a Patreon. We got all that wonderful, beautiful, great, fantastic stuff. And yeah, until next time, stay healthy, stay hydrated. Peace.